Okay, I'm going to show you how to set up a new assessment in Ultramarker using an existing assessment brief. Now I've got this assessment brief here, an example of an assessment brief. So I've got a module title or subject title. I've got a module code in this case. I've got a module leader. It's got a level. This is going to be a report, but it could be any type of assessment. And we've got some other information. We'll have some assessment tasks and assessment criteria in the form of a rubric. We'll also have some learning outcomes. So we've got some tasks. In this case, this report is based upon a case study. So we tell our students what they need to put in the report. We also then have our assessment rubric with our assessment criteria. And the first thing you'll need to do is, if you've got a new subject or new module or new unit, you'll have to set up a new one for this subject. So I've got the institution name, I've got the unit title, which we had is Technological Systems. We've got a module code. I've given it a level 5. That's what we've got in this rubric here in the assessment brief. And we also need to define a pass mark for this module. So the standard one might be for your institution. In this case, it's 40%. Students need to achieve that to pass this module. We've got a unit leader. You don't actually need a unit leader signature file. That is optional. You do need to create a unit folder. So in this case, what I've done is I've created C:\Ultramarker. In that folder, I've created a folder called Tech Systems, because this is Technological Systems. I've created a folder called Tech Systems. When I created that, it automatically inserted my marks folder, but you could change that if you wanted to. But the marks folder is C:\Ultramarker Tech Systems /marks. I don't need student names in a comma separated variable file at this stage. I don't actually need this. Again, this is optional. A peer review template file is optional, as is a unit moderation template file and an external examiner moderation template file. So once I've entered that information, I save that. That's my new subject set up. The next thing I need to make sure I have is my grading schema. So this should already be set up if you've already set up some assessments in Ultramarker. So you've got your institutional grading schema. So if you look at, say, a C1, the equivalent percentage is 58% in this particular case. You've got a lower grade boundary and an upper grade boundary. So between which percentages will we accept something as being a C1 or a C2 or whatever it happens to be? Your own grading schema might be different. You might have A+, A minus, B+, B minus, etc. Or it might be a named scheme, or it might be a numeric scheme of some sort. But you define that yourself. Don't have to use this one. Then we've got learning outcomes. Now we need to define some new learning outcomes. So we'll clear all the current ones. And we've got some in this document here. So we've got discuss a wide range of aspects of systems and services. That's one of my learning outcomes. So I'm going to add that learning outcome. Now we don't know if it's a knowledge and understanding one, so I'll just put it as miscellaneous in this case. If we want to, we could actually just put a description in here as well, optional description, but I'll just save that one. So we've got that one. We'll add the next one. This again it's shown as miscellaneous, analyze technology, etc. So we'll just add that learning outcome. And we'll save that one. We've got another couple of learning outcomes to add. Implement and troubleshoot. So we'll add that one in there as well. Okay, we'll save that. And also the last learning outcome, we'll add that in there as well. Formulate. So we'll put that into there. And we'll save that. Now at this stage we haven't actually saved that, so what we will do is we then need to go to the file menu and we need to save it. So I'll call this Just give it a short name for the moment, TechSys, and that will be saved as a .lo file. And that saves my learning outcomes. Now I can transfer the learning outcomes to the assessment as well. So I will transfer them over to the assessment tab. We'll go to the assessment tab. Then we need to start a new assessment. So new assessment. So we'll delete everything on the form. We then need to give it an assessment title. Now we will go back up to here. We've got technological systems. And this is, well, this is actually, that's the module name, isn't it? So what we'll have is, this is just the report, isn't it? So this is just the report here. So it's technological systems report. We've only got one assessment, so I'll use this as just 1 or A1. The weighting is 100% within the this subject, as you can see here. So the assessment type is a report. Assessment title is a report, and the type is type is a report. So we will then put in, we then need to put in what are we asking our students to do. So we can put in our description here. We can put in, you know, what sort of things are we asking our students to do. Obviously, with this be populated with a lot more information, we need to define our case study. We're using a case study, so we'd need to put that in there as well. So we're telling our students, what are you supposed to be doing for this assessment? So that's what we're doing. So we've got a description of our assessment, and we've defined that so far. Now then, we haven't got any criteria. So where do we get that from? So let's scroll down to our assessment rubric. There's our assessment rubric. So now we need to add criteria. Now what's the first criteria? So the first one is introduction to the theme and case, involving the case study, etc. So we'll put that in there. So we might just, I'll just call this introduction. I think we'll just call this introduction as the title. And we can put some detail in here. So I'm going to edit that again. This is our detail. So we need to say introduction to the theme for, for involving the case study, etc. So we need to give some more description in there to say what are you supposed to do for that. Okay, so we might want to put more information in there for that. We'll leave that as it is for the moment. Now we've got some grades. So we've got some grades to achieve criteria. We need to populate that. So you can see here with our rubric we've got some criteria to achieve the A grades, in other words. So I'm going to put that in here. So I'll do that for each of our A grades, because they all, obviously what could define the difference is optional feedback if I wanted to add that in there. So that's my A grades. I then need to go to my B grades, and these are my B grades here. Then I need to look at my C grades. So I'll put all of my C grades in there. Then I'm on to my D grades. Then I'm on to my F grades. And then for S, well, this is that I've submitted something, but it doesn't match any criteria. So, they've submitted something, but it doesn't match anything. Then we'll go on to the N grade, so nothing submitted. So nothing submitted for this criteria. So you could say no introduction, I suppose. That's another way of saying it, isn't it? So we've covered that. What the other thing that we could do is we could add some optional feedback or comments for the grade. So in other words, what we're saying is, if we looked at, say, grade B1, what could we suggest to our students that they could do to improve this introduction? So this could be specific, optional comments for feedback. So that I've put my introduction in there. I now need to add the next criteria, which is going to be my discussion. I'll just call this discussion. So we'll use that as the title there, and then we can put some more detail in there. So we'll go back to here and we'll put in the full description of what we're asking our students to provide us with. And you could put more detail in there. You could take that from the description of the whole assessment to give them more detail, about what we're expecting from them. Then obviously what we need to do is we need to look at the A grades again. So I'm going to take that from the rubric again. Then I need to look at the B grades. Then the C grades. Then the D grades. And then the F grades. And then again for this one, I'll just save that about. What I will do is I'll go back to my original S grade here and I'll just cut and paste that. So nothing submitted for this criteria, or you could say no discussion, in other words, of this theme, as it were. So we've added that one. Now we need to go back and add the last of our criteria. So this is our recommendations. So I just call this recommendations. And then we'll also need to add a description of that. And again, I could elaborate on that if I want to. So I don't need to just rely on the title. I can actually add the information from the description as well to that. So now I'm going to go back to my A grades. So I will paste those into there. Then I'll go to my B grades. Then the C grades. And then the D grades. then my F grades. And then I'll save that for the moment, and I'll go back to my S grade again, just cut and paste that again. Go back to there. And we go to the to there. Okay, so we've saved all of that. The other thing I will do is I'm going to go back to my learning outcomes, and I will just I'll just save that for the temporarily. Don't forget to save things. You must save it. So save the assessment. So I'll call this Tech Sys. That's saved that. I'll just go back to the learning outcomes. I will transfer them back through to the assessment again, and I'll save that again. So save it to Tech Sys. Okay, so we've saved the learning outcomes with it as well. Now, what else can we do to improve this? Well, again, you could give more detail to the description of the requirements, for each of your criteria. The other thing you could do, as I said, is to add some optional feedback. So how could you improve? So look at each of these grades. What could you suggest to your students to improve? Good. Okay, that's it. That's setting up that assessment in this assessment brief here. Now, the obviously you could give more. You could change what you put for each grade, but of course this has been taken from a rubric. This is just a standard sort of single hierarchy, single page rubric. So you can see the deficiencies of some of those, a single rubric of this sort presented in paper format. But what you could do here is you could change what your expectations are between A1 and A2, for example, and A3, A4, and B1, B2, and X, and so on. So you could actually change the criteria to make it more specific for each grade. And you could also give optional feedback. Again, you can't put that in a paper-based rubric so easily, but you could change what you want for optional feedback, what you want to suggest to students for feedback. The other thing you've got to do is also the weighting. What weightings have you got for each of your criteria? Now, I've said the introduction is worth 10%, the discussion is 70, and the recommendations are 20. So they've all got to add up to obviously to 100%. So the first one is going to be 10. The second one is going to be 70. So don't forget to do that, otherwise it's you're going to have zero. Your students are going to get 0 marks, aren't they? And this is going to be 20. Okay. Don't forget to save your changes again. Okay, the other thing you can do is just to double check to make sure that everything adds up to 100%. So select check weights, and it says everything is okay. So the standard, just for this standard rubric, for the criteria type, I've selected no check boxes. Weightings for sub-criteria are part of the weighting for a criteria. I don't have any sub-criteria, so when you're starting out in this, it's a good idea just to use a rubric, a standard rubric with a single hierarchy, not using sub-criteria, in other words. If you start with that, learn how to use the system before you start using advanced features. So, okay, I'm ready to start marking then. If I switch from the current mode to, which is edit criteria mode, to marking mode, and I'm ready to start marking. So I just put in a test student name. And obviously for each of my criterion I need to give a grade. So I could say A4 for the first one. They've got a reasonably good introduction discussion, maybe they've done a good job of that as well, so we'll give them A4. Maybe the recommendations could be a bit better, but still okay, still good. So we've got that. The other thing I could do is to put some comments in here. Now the other thing that I haven't done for this, but I could set up a comments file specific to this module or even specific to this assessment. I've got one in here for an example seminar, so they don't apply to this, but I could just, if I wanted to select some standard comments, because students often make the same mistakes, what I could do is I could just double click and it will insert a standard comment. So I don't need to type in the comments necessarily manually, I can actually get them automatically inserted. And I can also insert comments for the assessment overall. So if I look at the report overall, I can give feedback overall. And again, I can do this from using standard comments from a comments file, and I can define that comments file. So I can start a new comments file in here again. So I can say new comments, and I can start defining my comments here. So that's it. That's using my rubric, my assessment brief, and the rubric within the assessment brief to create an assessment in Ultramarker, and how I can use Ultramarker to mark that assessment. Now if I save that, it's then going to save. I will then see that my student has got a scored a percentage. If I go into the report, I can see the report for the student, and it gives an overall grade, and I can save that for the student as well. The other thing that I can also do, if I go back into edit criteria mode, is I can change the feedback that I want to select for that report. So there's a whole load of things I can select to put in that report. So if I want a minimal report, I can deselect a lot of these options. If I want much more detail, I can select more of these options. If I want percentages, I can show those. If I want percentages and grades, I can show those as well, and so on. So that's how you set up an assessment using a sort of standard assessment brief that you may have within your organisation.